Hello and welcome to It's All About You, the best show about you on the internet. I am B. Dave Walters, writer, life coach, talk radio host, college professor, man of 1,000 talents. This is episode number 73, Daddy Issues. And it could be mommy issues, and really it could be called forgiveness too. But we've kind of tiptoed around this whole concept of the baggage that we inherit from our parents. So let's talk about this right off, because I had a question that somebody submitted through FormSpring. And remember, you can send me questions, ask me anything. Either you can give your name or you can ask anonymously through a website called FormSpring, form like membership form and spring like the season, .me/B Dave Walters. FormSpring.me/B Dave Walters. And the question was, let me see if I can get this up here. Here's literally what it says. What is likely to be a guy who grew up without father? What is likely to be a guy who grew up without father? So I'm thinking this is probably one of my brothers or sisters that speaks English as a second language, and what they're asking me is what's most likely going to happen to a guy that grows up without his father. So let's talk about that. Well, before I do, let me say something very important, because this can be a touchy subject with people. Human beings are both incredibly simple and infinitely complex. The fact of the matter is, if you do certain things to us, if you expose us to certain situations, then you get a certain outcome. 9 out of 10 times, right? That if you can kind of say, you can sort of backtrack. If you've ever talked to me, then a lot of times I can probably tell you your history and like where you come from just based on the things that you were telling me. But nothing that has happened to us, nothing that has happened with our family or in our past or experiences dictates who and what we are. Not your astrological sign, anything. So no matter where you've come from, no matter what you've been through, you still can control how that occurs to you and what you're going to do in the future and how you can change. Does that make sense? I mean, I've had a few people that, when we talk about certain issues, one of the very first things that I will always ask is, what was your relationship with your father like? And what was his relationship with your mother like? Okay? Now, I know not everybody had the opportunity to grow up in a home with both parents, for whatever reason. Maybe one parent left, maybe one parent passed away. Just for whatever reason, you didn't have them both there. And for those of you single moms and single dads that are out there doing the best that you can, I understand and I applaud you, okay? But if possible, if both parents are alive and willing to be in the child's life, then kids need their parents. They need their mom and their dad, okay? If they can't have their actual mom and their actual dad, then they definitely need, and I'm knocking stuff over here, they definitely need strong male and female role models. Does that make sense? I mean, if you've got a deadbeat dad, and unfortunately there's a lot of deadbeat dads out there, you know what, I'm going to come back to you deadbeat dads soon. We've talked about this before. But if you've got a deadbeat dad, find positive men for your son to be around and find positive men for your daughter to be around, okay? No matter how hard you try, you can do your best to wear both hats, but they need that other part because it is something that we're just wired for. It's something human beings are just meant to do. There's a reason why God required 2 of us to procreate. Not 1 of us, not 3 of us. 2 of us. We both bring things into the equation, the man and the woman, and the child comes into the world needing things from both of us, the man and the woman. Does that make sense? It's like I've been fortunate to be blessed with 2 little girls, and it's an amazing thing that I talk to guys that are having their first child. I've talked to women, but with women you all have oxytocin, hormones, you just see the baby and your brain kind of kicks in and you know how to love it and be there for it almost like automatically. Again, 100 million years of evolution will do that for you. But guys, believe it or not, we have that too. We have it to a much lower level. I've shared with you before the story that when Lexi, my now 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old, was born, at the hospital where she was born, they don't give the baby to the mom, they give the baby to the dad. So literally, it was like, okay, here she comes, it's a girl. And they just put this, squirming thing that was all arms and legs in my arms. And I just remember thinking how hot she was. And, you know, she's there and she's crying and, you know, she's 8 seconds old. And I remember thinking it was just like switches were flipping in my brain. You know, like new programs were activating just right when I looked at her. I was like, okay, my only purpose in life is to keep you safe. I understand that now. Everything I thought was important is no longer important. You were important and you're most important. And it happened. But what I tell guys is they come into the world. They come from the factory, preloaded with loving their daddy. Okay? Especially little girls. You don't have to do anything to get them to love you. Just be around and they're going to love you. All you have to do is not do anything to make them stop loving you. Okay? Because here's the thing. It's almost impossible for them to stop loving you, even when you deserve it. Even if you don't deserve their love, rather. If you watch shows like Hoarders or Intervention or any of these like train wreck family dramas, you'll see children will stay around long after they should have left. But here's the thing. You will twist what love means to them. It's not that they will become incapable of love. They will start to interpret your behavior as love. So if you grew up with an abusive father, you know, you don't sit down and think to yourself, well, clearly he raises his voice and hits me, so he doesn't love me. Your little mind will start to process that that's what love looks like. It's like, because daddy loves me, because daddy has to love me. So if daddy loves me, then that's what love looks like. Love looks like yelling and screaming and hitting, or inappropriate touching, or not being around, or whatever it is that you do. So fellas, please, we've talked about this before, especially in the episode on men. Please, be there for your children. They need you. They need you in a way that you cannot comprehend. And you not being there is damaging them. And it's damaging in ways that you don't expect that will manifest. They're probably already manifesting. In 10 or 20 years from now, they're going to have to work with somebody like me that helps them uncover all this baggage that stems back to the fact that you were mean and not around, or made them feel like they weren't important. Okay? See, because the reason why I'm always asking people is, what was your relationship with your father like, and what was his relationship with your mother like, is that's where we learn how two human beings are supposed to interact. That's where we learn what love is supposed to look like, what a relationship is supposed to look like, what a marriage is supposed to look like. And again, we come into the world, all of us come into the world knowing mommy and daddy will teach us everything. But here's the thing. This is what we fail to take into account. Maybe nobody taught mommy and daddy how to be mommies and daddies. Okay? Especially if you knew your grandparents, and maybe you know that your grandparents were abusive and terrible and neglectful or whatever. And then your parents are just acting out what they saw. Right? Because one of the hallmarks of NLP, you know, neuro-linguistic programming, is people are doing the best that they can. I mean, unfortunately, there are some psychopaths out there, but for the most part, most people don't sit down and think to themselves, I'm going to consciously screw up my children. I'm going to scar them emotionally today. That's my plan for this afternoon. No. They're acting out of their own fear and neglect and pain and insecurity and baggage and damage from their past. You understand? This is how you start getting those generational curses. You know, in the Bible, how it says the sins of the father will be revisited upon the son for generation after generation. And a lot of people say, well, that's not fair. Why should your children be punished for what you've done? But here's the thing. Your children are already being punished for what you've done. And they're going to take that baggage and they're going to pass it on to their children. It's like I shared with you. You know, I like to think I'm a pretty tough guy. You know, I'm all 6'9", 265, Mr., you know, black belt martial artist. You know, I don't spook too easily, right? But I'm terrified of bees. Terrified. Never been stung. Terrified of bees. Okay? And I never knew why I was afraid of bees. I thought I'd been killed by bees and been a past life or something. Until one day I mentioned to my mom in passing that I was afraid of bees. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm afraid of bees. And I was like, you are? And she's like, yeah. When I was a little girl, my uncle got drunk and he fell into a beehive. And I watched him and he was too drunk to get up. So he just rolled around and got stung up by hive full of bees. And so I've been scared of bees ever since. It was when I was 5 or 6 years old. So think about that. This was an event that my mother witnessed in the 1950s, right? That traumatized her, understandably so, but she passed that trauma on to me. And even though I'm aware of this consciously, when bees are around, my pulse gets raised, right? Like, I'd rather fight a grizzly bear than have to deal with some bees, okay? And the fact that I know this consciously doesn't make any difference. It helps process the fear, and it helps process, the anxiety that comes up, right? But it's still there. It's still there. But let me tell you something to tie this back into fatherhood. 2 things have happened. The first time, when Lexi was born, she was maybe 2 months old, maybe 3. I was out walking with her, and a beehive was forming in front of the grocery store. And I was walking, and I didn't know until too late that I was in the middle of this cloud of bees, which in the past, the old me would have screamed and dropped her and run away like a little girl. But I knew I had to protect my baby, right? So I just cuddled up with her like a football and walked through this cloud of bees, which they didn't hurt me or anything. But I was like, man, I must love you that I just confronted my mortal fear to protect you from it. And then later, she was 2. Because it was before Kaylin was born, so she might have even been 2 or 3. Sometime last summer. I was walking, and I had her on my back in one of those back harnesses things, which is my favorite thing in the world to do. And I'm walking, and I'm standing at the light to cross the street, four-way stop intersection. And I see, a bee fly by, but it's summertime. That happens. I mean, it's not like I just can't stand the fact that, a bee's around. So, I see a bee, no big deal. 2 bees. I'm like, all right, no problem. Sitting there waiting for the light to change so I can cross the street at this busy intersection, right? And I look down at the ground, and I can see the shadows on the ground, because the sun's overhead. And in the shadows, I see hundreds of bee shadows moving on the ground, like something from a horror movie. Seriously, you look at the shadow, and you're like, how can the monster be behind me? Nah, So I look up, and on the light post, the street light, is covered in bees. It's black, right? I know now, how the whole hive moves and they land for a little while and they just sit somewhere and then the hive moves again? An entire beehive, 3 feet from my head, right? And I swear that took a year off of my life right then. My heart stopped because I couldn't stay there, but I couldn't run across the street screaming like a little girl, but I still got Lexi on my back. So, I just have to figure out what to do. And I ended up just moving away and crossing the street later. But I'm telling you, waiting for that light to change was the longest 30 seconds of my life. But that's what it took to protect my baby, right? So, what's the point of that whole story? Besides, pointing out that I'm afraid of bees, Mr. Tough Guy. You've got to be there for your children, okay? Because if you're not, they're going to start to interpret what you do and what you don't do as what is supposed to happen. Does that make sense? If you're neglectful, if you're mean, if you're a bully, a classic example, someone else I know, they're having problems with their child is a bully, which is tough. Nobody wants to get that phone call that your kid's a bully. But here's the thing. The dad bullies her. She gets in people's faces and yells and points her finger in her face because when she does something wrong, that's what her father does to her. And he can't see it. He can't see that my kid is bullying others because I am bullying her. He can't make that connection at all, right? Now, something really powerful that I did as a part of the Landmark Forum, again, landmark education, changed my life. They took 2 people out of the crowd. They took a guy who was about 25 and a girl who was about 21. And they said, look at these 2 kids. Do they look like they have all the answers? And we're like, no, they're just kids, It's do they look like, that they've got everything figured out? And they're like, no, again, at 25 and 21, you don't know anything at that age. And they were like, how old were your parents when you were born? And it's oh, think about that. They probably weren't much older than you are now when you were born. In fact, they might have been younger than you are now when you were born, right? And nobody helped them. Again, raising children is the hardest job in the world, for which you get no training at all. Okay? And on the surface, things that you think are helping, like, being very strict with them and discipline and spanking and, not letting them do all these bad things, is actually scarring the hell out of them. Okay? So here's the thing. We don't have a ton of time left. So for you parents out there, let me just say, discipline them however seems fit to you in your own, cultural and personal guidelines, right? But just make sure that whenever you're correcting them, because it is our job to be a parent first and a friend second, okay? That is true. It's good if you can be friends, but be a parent first, okay? But make sure you're always correcting them from a place of love and never from a place of anger, okay? Ever, all right? If you find yourself yelling at them because you're mad, or God forbid you're hitting them because they're mad, you really got to stop doing that, because you're not helping, and you are hurting them, and you are hurting them massively, okay? Now, for those of you that, again, maybe grew up without a mom or a dad, or find yourself kind of living into these same type of situations, because I'm going to tell you real quick how not having a dad manifests differently for boys and girls. In general, a boy that grows up without a dad, or with a highly neglectful dad, or one who's not around, will become aggressive and act out, is more likely to get into trouble and do things for attention. A girl who grows up without a dad is more likely to end up in a string of bad relationships, maybe pursue older guys, and try and find somebody to fill in that role and lure them, probably with sex. For boys that grow up without moms, same thing, but it's almost the exact opposite. They tend to have the messed up relationships. They can't commit. They can't express themselves, right? And they're very emotionally unavailable. And little girls that grow up without moms, it's almost the exact opposite then. They are the ones who act out and try and get attention and don't know how to be what they're supposed to be and don't know how to be comfortable in their own skin. And this isn't just human beings. In Africa, they had a big problem after poaching. They had a lot of orphan male elephants that were going crazy, destroying things. And the only way they could solve this problem with these young rampaging elephants was they brought in adult male elephants. They brought in bulls to just shut that crap down, because we need that, okay? We need men and women to rise up with integrity and be there for young people, okay? But if for whatever reason your parents weren't there and they didn't support you and they weren't what you wanted, the fact is, it's done. They did what they did, or they didn't do what they didn't do, okay? They gave you life, and you will always owe them for that. No matter how terrible they were after that. You were here today, and if you're glad to be alive, you have them to thank for it. Okay? So remember, forgive them for what they did and for what they didn't do. And release that pent-up negativity. Okay? If you're not sure how, watch all the episodes on forgiveness, because we've talked about it a few times. Alright? And even better, thank them for what they did do. Because rearing a child is not easy. If they saw you safely through and you were able to leave home alive and whole, especially if you only had one parent, thank them. Because they worked their fingers to the bone and they sacrificed a lot for you to be who you are and where you are, okay? And again, remember, whatever happened, whatever they did, whatever they didn't do, you are who you are today because of, or maybe in spite of it, okay? And the only thing you can do is try and do better with your own children. And if you don't have children, try and help out with somebody else's children. Volunteer. There's a lot of people out there that need somebody who's just going to love them unconditionally and not manipulate and scar them. Okay? Love your children. Let them know you love them and you are being a good parent. Okay? But I love you. And that's what's important. Find me. You can find all my links on a website called about.me/B Dave Walters. About.me/B Dave Walters. Okay? I'll see you soon. All right. Bye.